I'll start off, and later on, Mr. Vinoy will take over to discuss the physical anthropology component with you people. So, before I start, am I audible? Is my microphone working for the online students? Okay. So, any idea what is anthropology? Anyone? Anyone here in this class who has had anthropology as one of the subjects in your academics? No? That's the greatest advantage of anthropology, actually. You're not competing with somebody who has had any kind of an academic training in this discipline. Any idea what is anthropology? Sorry? Study of human evolution. Anyone else would like to give it a shot? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Anyone else?
Study of man in time and space.
Study of man in time and space. Okay, I'm also getting some replies online. The study of humans as a whole. Okay. Yeah. Come again. Study of human behavior in a scientific approach. Okay. I think nobody can go wrong when they define anthropology. The reason is because almost every aspect of the humanity is studied in this particular discipline. You know, the word anthropology itself is a definition for this discipline. Anthropos is a Greek word which means human, and logos, I'm sure you know, means science or reasoning. And when we try to translate these two words, the etymology of anthropology is the science of humanity. But there are many other sciences, right, that also deal with the mankind, the humankind. We have all the social sciences that are dealing with the mankind. We have many life sciences like biology, human anatomy, medical science that also talk about man. In fact, all the humanities are, exploring certain aspects of human behavior and human creativity. And do you know something? That anthropology is one of the youngest disciplines in the family of social sciences. The subject came into existence probably around 150 to 200 years ago. And it was originally thought of in the Greek school of philosophy. Anthropology had its origin in philosophy. And subsequently, you know, it became an academic discipline in the University of Oxford somewhere in the late 19th century. And this discipline, despite being one of the youngest in the family of social sciences, is the most comprehensive discipline that ever studied man or ever studies man. Because we deal with almost all the aspects of humanity. Social sciences, take for example, sociology. It only picks up the social behavior and the study of society and the various aspects of human society and social behavior. Psychology looks at the human behavior from, you know, the cognitive and other aspects like intelligence. And you have economics that is picking up only one aspect of the human behavior, which is how the humans produce, distribute, and consume. Political science only talks about how authority, democracy, parliament, and the state exists in the various societies of the world. And in humanities, you have literature that picks up a particular stream of literature and looks at it. But none of these disciplines, you see, is looking at the human behavior as a holistic phenomenon. You know, our culture, our social behavior ultimately is also based on our biology. And the youngest of the species on earth is also the Homo sapiens. Do you know the meaning of Homo sapiens? What does it mean? No, that's the biological name of the human beings, but you know the meaning of the word Homo sapien? Sapiens means wise, and Homo is man. We belong to a family called Hominidae in the animal kingdom, and Homo sapiens translates to the wise man. And you know, when we evolved on Earth, the modern man, as we are, supposed to be the most wisest of the wise and the most intelligent species. Do you know how old we were on the surface of this Earth? We have been living on this Earth for less than 50,000 years. You know, we have had our cousins like the Neanderthals and all who lived a little longer than us. But the modern Homo sapien, you know, the way we are, is actually a very recent innovation in the biological or organic evolution. And this short span of time, look at where we are. We have become the masters of our own destiny. Today, we are on the top of the food chain. We don't have a predator. We are our own worst predators. You know, we created science, technology, religion, economy, politics. And where do you think all this intelligence is ultimately coming from? Why do you think man ultimately evolved in this way? The answer lies in our biology and biological evolution. But none of the disciplines, you see, is trying to look at the humanity as a holistic phenomenon. It doesn't try to link biology with culture, culture with the social behavior. And that is the reason why anthropology emerged. It emerged as the holistic study of man. There's virtually the reason I told you that none of your definitions can be wrong is mainly because of a simple reason that there's virtually nothing under the sky that we don't study. And the reason we say this is one of the most comprehensive of all the disciplines that deal with, man, is because there is a parallel to every social science in anthropology. There's a parallel to every life science in anthropology. There's a parallel to every behavioral science in anthropology. And as a consequence, you see, we have emerged as one of the most comprehensive disciplines that deals with this species. And this is not the class where I will be discussing with you about, the scope and the branches, but I can put it in a nutshell for you that there are three fundamental questions that we try to answer in anthropology. One is, who is man? Man here means the biological man, okay? It means the human being. Who are the humans? Second, where did they come from? And that's where we need to answer the questions both biologically and culturally. And the third is, why do we behave the way we do? You know, every other species also has the same needs as us: hunger, thirst, sex, or sexual drive. Many other species also manifest certain behaviors that we manifest: anger, aggression, you know, that sense of being a predator. But we are not like those animals, right? Even man's closest relative is the chimpanzee, with whom we share about 98% of our DNA, and the number is increasing every day, I understand. And look at where the chimpanzees are and where we are. We and chimpanzees shared a common ancestor very recently, till very recent time, and then we split. The chimpanzees continue to be the apes as they were, and we evolved into the so-called wise species Homo sapien. So this intrigued anthropology. This intrigued the philosophers, actually, people like Aristotle. You know, we also have the German philosophers, one of whom you will be studying in ethics, Immanuel Kant. And these are the people who inspired the birth of anthropology. And subsequently, anthropology began as an academic discipline in Oxford University, subsequently in USA, and then in Germany. And today, anthropology has emerged as one of the most happening sciences in academia. And anthropology has become popular in civil services for various reasons. I'm sure you must have done your own homework before taking a plunge into civil services. I'm sure you will make informed decisions, but it has its own inherent advantages. But let me tell you at the outset that no subject is good or bad inherently. It's what you make of it. There's a lot of effort that goes into. I should congratulate you people for having chosen to take this path, because not very many people in this country decide to at least take this exam, leave alone clear it. And it does require a lot of hard work. And I have been training students in anthropology for civil services since 1993. I passed out of University of Hyderabad. I specialized in a domain called medical anthropology subsequently. I worked amongst the Kodavas, one of the ancient cultures in Karnataka, Coorg it is. And I've also worked amongst the tribes of Paderu, which is the area, a tribal belt, which is the border between Andhra Pradesh and Orissa. And I have also been working in the domain of urban environment and, capacity building in urban anthropology space. But teaching has always been my passion, and I've been doing this for 30 years. So whatever I say comes with a lot of experience. Whether a subject is inherently good or bad. No subject is inherently good or inherently bad. It all depends on how you make of it. But when you choose an optional, you need to weigh the pros and cons, because this examination is something I consider it one of the toughest exams in the world, and you're competing with the best brains in the country, and you have to prove that you're one of them. And in this process, which is itself very laborious, your optional should not add an extra burden on you. It should help you in whatever possible way it can. It should facilitate you, especially when you are actually preparing for your compulsory papers, which are your general studies and general essay, which you cannot choose, neither can you escape. So in that context, I have designed the content of today's workshop, which I hope will help you in making your own decisions subsequently. And I also would advise you to go through even the other optional subjects before you make your decision here. Can I change this? Will some of you tell me what are you expecting from this workshop so that I can actually incorporate them if I miss? How do I? I'll use a color which will be friendly for the people who are also looking at the screen online. But what I will do is that since I already gave you a bird's eye view about the subject, what it entails, let me give you the scope of the subject as far as the civil service examination is concerned. And anthropology is being a very comprehensive subject. There are hundreds of specializations in anthropology, super specializations in anthropology. And thankfully, we don't have it. In fact, 2015 is when the syllabus of anthropology changed. And 2015, according to me, is also a kind of a paradigm shift in the pattern of the civil service exam itself. Earlier, the optional papers used to carry 600 marks, and there was no limit on the number of papers that you can fill up. And the syllabus was also pretty humongous, if you ask me. But it has become more structured. And today, the civil service examination, I'm sure you have seen that you will get pre-printed answer scripts. There's a defined space, and there's no word limit, but there's a space limit and time limit for the questions. I'll also tell you about how the questions are structured in this exam. So every optional, including anthropology, has 2 papers. And we can classify the papers for our academic convenience. I would say that paper 1 is made up of 2 specializations in anthropology, which are called socio-cultural anthropology, and the second one is called as physical anthropology. Physical anthropology is also the part of paper 1. And then we have paper 2, and paper 2 is what we refer to as Indian anthropology. Now, if you ask me what is anthropology, you know, the most important aspect of anthropology is that it looks at man from a biological point of view, it looks at man from a cultural point of view, and it also looks at man from a social perspective. These are the three natures that make a human being. If you ask me what makes a human, you know, we are biological, cultural, as well as the social species. We share our biology with every other species on Earth, so there's nothing special except, of course, that we have a very unique, anatomy, and we have a very awkward posture, which is called the erect posture, and we are vertical, and then as a consequence of not walking on the four legs, we ended up actually freeing our forelimbs, and they ended up evolving into hands. And these hands, are not like any other hands. They have a capacity, or what we call as prehensility, where, we are able to control the movement of these digits or fingers. And we have something called opposability. Our thumb is not aligned in the same plane as the other fingers. Like your big toe, is in the same plane as the other toes. And because of this, we ended up developing a capacity to hold objects very firmly. And this is what is called as the power grip. And we can also hold objects in a very delicate way. This is called the precision grip. And this precision grip and power grip married with this kind of a complex brain that we have. We don't have a big brain, mind you. I think a buffalo on the road has a bigger brain than us. But what makes us intelligent is we have a larger brain to body size ratio. For the body that we have, the brain size that we have is humongous. And this brain and the cerebral cortex, it is called, which is very complex. When these things are put together, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. We became the inventors. We became tool makers. We became tool users. And this brain was growing up, growing in size as we were evolving for unknown reasons that we will try to explore some later. As a consequence, our brain cannot develop before birth. Our brain has to develop after birth. When you look at other animals, like take a bird, the hatchlings won't stay with their parents in the nest for more than few days. The reason is because much of their brain is anyway developed before they are born. It's just that the last minute neural connections has to happen, and they are ready to get out of their parental care. But you know how much time our brain takes to develop fully? Any idea? When are you considered an adult in your culture? 18 years is only because of the political reasons, but it actually takes close to 2 decades for our brain to fully become mature. We are sexually mature even before we are intellectually mature. That's why, once upon a time, now even many cultures even today don't consider somebody an adult till the time they are 20 or 21. And as a consequence, we spend a lot of time with our family, we spend a lot of time with our parents, our siblings, and our relatives. So it is this biological reason that has laid the foundation for the human cultural behavior. The cultural behavior includes our ability to, materialize whatever we imagine or whatever ideas we may have. We can invent things, we can manufacture things, we can make tools. And another behavior that is keeping you and me together right now is the language, the ability to speak, the ability to verbalize whatever we are thinking. Thinking alone is a very important, I would say, ability, cognitive ability as we call it. But trying to verbalize whatever we are thinking in real time and communicating with each other, all this constitutes our cultural behavior. Another aspect of our cultural behavior is we have the symbolic phenomena called gods. We have created a supernatural world, and in that world exist our gods, our evils, and we are trying to communicate not only between ourselves, but we are also communicating with our Almighty, the supernatural. No other species is exhibiting this kind of complex behavior that we call as culture. What enabled us to have this culture? Our biology. Biology is the foundation. This brain, these nimble hands, this ability to walk on the two legs, and also the fact that this brain has to develop after we are born, what we call as postnatal development. We are compelled to form groups, and these groups emerged into families. Those families extended, became larger groups, and those larger groups ended up becoming societies. There's no science that is trying to link biology with culture, culture with society. So anthropology is in essence a biosocial cultural study of man. And that is the reason why your syllabus can be broadly classified into socio-cultural. You can't discuss culture without society and vice versa. So cultural anthropology and social anthropology merged. And it's one major branch called socio-cultural anthropology. And then we have the biosocial or biocultural study of man, which is called as physical anthropology. And these two broad streams constitute your paper one. And paper one, we can broadly classify them into two sections, like every other optional paper. And socio-cultural anthropology and physical anthropology, you have a little bit of archaeology and something called linguistic anthropology. These are the four branches actually, are the part of your paper one. Your syllabus is organized in such a way that you study less and less about more and more, rather than studying more and more about less and less. Because there are some subjects, like for example, take philosophy or take some other subject in humanities. The syllabus may apparently look lesser in the employment news or the gazette notification, but the quantum or the magnitude of study remains the same across all the optionals. There's nothing like one optional has more syllabus and the other optional has lesser. Even though UPSC says it's a BA honors level examination, looking at the quality of the questions that are asked and the level of analysis and interpretation you people should have, I would consider that this examination's optional subjects, all of them, are BA honors, a little more than BA honors, sometimes postgraduate level. So the syllabus does look a little elaborate in anthropology, is mainly because every topic, subtopic, sub-subtopic has been clearly defined. That's an advantage because there are no shockers. You know exactly what you are expected to study. The examiner is making it very obvious, and you'll have a defined scope of the discipline. And anthropology in the context of India is what is called as Indian anthropology. India is one of the most richest cultures in the world. This is the place which is called an anthropologist's paradise, is because all we have to do is travel for 1 hour in any direction, and our lifestyles change, the topography changes, the languages change, the food changes, people change, customs change. And this kind of museum of culture called India has been attracting visitors and anthropologists for a very long time. So we have a rich amount of anthropological work that has done in India, and some of the most significant areas of research are part of your paper 2, which is called as Indian anthropology. Your optional, your syllabus in the notification doesn't call them socio-cultural, physical, or Indian. It's just called paper 1 and paper 2. You have different chapters, but for our academic convenience, because we need to give ourselves a structure so that there is a direction in which we can pursue our study. So let me give you a brief introduction to each topic you have in the syllabus at a very generic level. I won't take much of your time, so that it will make sense when I talk to you about how anthropology is going to be helpful in other subjects in this examination. Anthropology is only not the only subject, right? It's only 2 papers. And how many papers you have totally in mains? 9. Huh? Out of 9, it's only 2 papers. And optional is included in the 9? Yeah. So in what way can anthropology help you in the 7 other papers? You know, if I have to convince you, I have to surely take you through at least a bird's eye view of what the subject has. So let's look at what you have as a part of paper 1, socio-cultural anthropology. As I told you, this is that aspect of your subject which deals with the social and cultural nature of man. And obviously, the very first topic will be the meaning and the scope and the branches of anthropology. Thankfully, you have this chapter which will give you an introduction to what is anthropology, how we can define this discipline, and how the scope of anthropology has been evolving. Every subject evolves. And the reason why anthropology is a very dynamic discipline during its history is because humanity never remains static. You know, our problems never remain the same. And as long as we keep evolving every day, as long as evolution is not just biological, we also evolve socially, we also evolve culturally. And as long as the humans are evolving behaviorally and biologically, obviously the scope of anthropology also keeps evolving. Because we study everything human. We study everything that touches the humanity and everything that the humanity touches. And as a consequence, you know, almost every, I don't think anthropology leaves any stone unturned when it comes to understanding humanity. So this chapter is the introductory chapter where we will be looking at what is anthropology, what are the most important and significant definitions, and we'll look at the branches of anthropology and specializations, and what makes anthropology a unique discipline in the family of social sciences, because there are, as I told you, many other subjects that also deal with man. So why do we need another one? You know, why can't sociology, philosophy, psychology, and all aren't they sufficient enough? The answer is no. The reason is because they are putting the human behaviors into different compartments and looking at that particular aspect of man as though it is an isolated aspect. So we felt that no, if you want to really understand what makes a human, you might as well look at this species from a holistic perspective. Holism is trying to look at some phenomena from all the perspectives and integrating the findings from all those perspectives. And then we will move into certain basic concepts. Most of us must have left the basic concepts of society and culture in 10th standard. And probably students who have had a CBSE curriculum must have studied a little bit of it in 11th and 12th also. But the basic concepts in social sciences is what we study here. This is where we will learn the vocabulary of social sciences. What is a society? What is culture? You know, I've been using these words in the last 10, 20 minutes. But these words actually have specific meaning. Society is not same as culture. And again, within the society, you have something called association, institutions. All these are critically important for your general studies. The basic concepts of society and culture is what I call this topic. And in general studies, you have many social issues that you will be studying. But general studies, you know, the discussions will be with the assumption that you already know the meanings of these words. You know, when you pick up a general studies book or a manual, they won't define each and every single term, but they will go with an assumption that you know the basics. And this is where you will be learning the ABC of social sciences, which you are not escaping by not taking anthropology. This topic is equally important for a student who doesn't has anthropology as one of his or her optionals. And then we will go into certain social behaviors of man. We call them the social institutions. So we do a comparative study of these social institutions. And this is where we are going to look at marriage, family, kinship. Kinship means relationship. And all of us have two types of relatives, those who are related to us by blood and those who are related to us by marriage. And kinship is all about, we are the only ones, the only species, once again, who have these social behaviors like marriage, family, kinship. We classify our relatives into two types: blood relatives and those related to us by marriage. Marriage and parentage, we call it. And we also look at our economic institutions. The branch of anthropology that specializes in this is called economic anthropology. This is where we learn about the basics of production, distribution, consumption, and how is it. Economics as a science deals only with capitalist and industrialized societies. But there are more than 6,500 cultures in this world, and all of them are not industrialized. There are many indigenous economies, many tribal economies in the world where the concept of profit doesn't exist, where the concept of money doesn't exist. And people produce there not to sell it in a market. They don't even have markets, but they produce something to share it with others. They produce something to consume directly. And modern economics cannot explain these economies. And that's the reason why we focus on non-industrial, non-capitalist nations in anthropology, because no other science looks at them. And then we also look at the political institutions, and this is called political anthropology. That's a specialization once again. And political science, which you have as a compulsory paper in your general studies, is only talking about constitution, parliament, government, bureaucracy, judiciary, executive. These are modern states. But there are hundreds and hundreds of various societies in the world where there is no organization called a state, there's no organization called a government, but they are living peacefully without military, they are living peacefully without police, they are living peacefully without courts of law, they don't have an executive, they don't have a bureaucracy. And how are these societies surviving? And they have been surviving for thousands of years. And political science never bothers to look at them. It focuses purely on modern societies. And that's the reason why anthropology felt it should have a parallel to political science, like we have a parallel to economics. And that became political anthropology. This is where we learn the basics of what is power, what is authority, what do we mean by the term legitimacy. And all these are critically important for your general studies once again, because in general studies, nobody is going to stop and wait for you to learn the basics. But here, the syllabus is designed in such a way that you study only the basics and not the complex phenomena. Remember what I told you. We study less and less about more and more. And that's how it's designed for you. And we also look at a very unique behavior we have called religion. We don't study a religion. We are not going to study Christianity, Islam, Hinduism. We are going to look at why religion. Why did we create this supernatural world? What are we achieving through this process? It must have been inspired by certain conditions in our past, what those conditions could be. And this religion that we created once upon a time to facilitate us and deal with certain issues, today has become the biggest issue in our lives. I mean, today I don't think there's any square kilometer on the surface of this planet which is free from some kind of ethnic or religious conflict. So we look at religion again from all these perspectives. What is the function? What could have been the reasons for its origin and how it has evolved? And what are the different forms of religion that exist in this world? We very famously say that there's nobody who can be an atheist, is because some kind of a belief system exists in all of humanity. Even believing in something called fate and destiny or luck is considered religion in anthropology. You don't have to believe in God. And by the way, God is not a universal phenomenon. Very few cultures have the concept and the notion of God. But they have religion, but those religions are not made of gods and spirits like in our case. So we look at that diversity of the human cultures in all these domains. Marriage is universal, but the way people understand marriage is different. Family is universal, but the way people think and imagine family to be and the functions this family performs in various cultures is different again. So this is a species that is considered to be one of the most diversified species everywhere. In this room, the small gathering of the humanity, I'm sure there must be tens of different languages, cultures, religions, customs, personalities, behaviors, and also biology. And you, as a human being, as a biological organism, there's only one model, one specimen made in this planet, on this planet, and that's only you. It's a very rare model. So celebrate who you are, because there's nobody else like you anywhere on the planet Earth. Biologically, behaviorally, each one of us is very uniquely made. We are tailor made. Even your identical twin, you may have an identical twin back at home. I had students in the class. I never could know who is attending and who is bunking. They are also not the same. Identical twins are also different at a behavioral level. So this is where we study the diversity. That's the reason we call it the comparative study of institutions, the different ways in which they exist in the world. And then we also look at certain anthropological work in the domain of culture. So approaches to the study of culture in anthropology. This is where we look at some theories that anthropologists have developed about culture. And culture being a very complex phenomenon, different people looked at it from a different perspective. And all of them are right in one way or the other. Nobody can go wrong in anthropology. By the way, the founders of anthropology were not anthropologists, obviously. Somebody has to start. They were philosophers, travelers, colonial administrators, biologists, medical doctors, psychologists, physicists, and geographers. All of them contributed to the birth of anthropology. Charles Darwin is considered to be one of the founding fathers of anthropology. People like Gregor Mendel, you remember Pisum sativum we studied in school? He is one of the founding fathers. And all those people, when they started discussing about biology and behavior, all that led to the birth of anthropology. And that's the reason why we have a parallel to almost every discipline here. And then I was telling you that we have another unique behavior called language. So we have something called as linguistic anthropology, another specialization within anthro. And here we see, we study language and speech. Other animals communicate, even plants communicate, microorganisms communicate. But the way we communicate is something very unique. We use something called speech, we use something called script. And we have this complex behavior, non-verbal behavior. I'm talking to you right now, but your judgments are not based on just what I'm saying. Your judgment is based on how I am dressed, my gestures, the way I'm standing, the way I'm speaking, where I'm taking a pause. Every aspect of it is being perceived by you. You wouldn't know it because you're not doing it consciously. And people start judging us even before we open our mouth. And we have this behavior which is called non-verbal behavior. And this chapter is going to be personally very helpful for you. You have a long life ahead and career ahead. You must be attending interviews. Subsequently, you'll be conducting interviews also. And non-verbal communication is enormously helpful for you to know how others are judging you. It's going to help you personally and also in your profession. And then we also look at the anthropological research methods. That is 4, this is 5. We also look at the anthropological research and methods. Every science has its own methods of conducting research. And anthropology has its own unique methods, because we are not only trying to discuss what we see with our naked eye, but we are also trying to make sense of the things that are invisible. We are trying to touch phenomena which are intangible. So we have our own methods to actually look at the human behavior, even when it is not visible directly for a scientist to observe. So anthropological research in that way is something that is very interesting actually, and very unique to our discipline. And then we will look at certain areas which are very unique to anthropology. For example, we have something called anthropological demography. What is demography? You have this in your general studies also. Population, the study of populations. You, in your general studies, you must be looking at fertility, mortality, migration, census, and how they calculate it. But anthropological demography is, we look at how cultural, behavioral, and biological factors influence the population in a society. You know, take for example, in a country like India, despite the fact that we have had a population policy even before independence. You know, India is one of the first developing countries to have something called a population policy and a family planning program. But despite the fact that we are the early, we realized pretty early that controlling population is important for the development of the nation. Look at where we are today. I think one record we have always broken is our population record. And today we are the world's most populated nation. It's not that we are not spending money. It's not that the government hasn't been running any campaigns. But there are some cultural factors that the government failed to recognize. And those cultural factors, there are also biological factors that influence fertility, that influence fertility is birth, mortality, which is death, migration, density of the population, age structures. India is also one of the most youthful nations, right? The youngest nation. Our Prime Minister and our government ambassadors are selling this concept to the world, that come to India because we have a humongous human resource, energetic. This is the time when people are the most healthiest, the people are the most hardworking, and this is the age where people are not susceptible to morbidity or diseases. Look at Japan. Japan today is one of the oldest nations. They are inviting people to come there. But many don't go to Japan. They would rather go to US, is because if you have to be in Japan, you have to be a Japanese. But you can remain an Indian wherever you are in US. You know, they are called Indian Americans or Chinese Americans or Korean Americans. But in Japan, that concept doesn't exist. That culture expects us to completely change our attitudes and mindset to suit the Japanese ethos, which is very difficult for the rest of the world. Consequence, a country like India today is monetizing on our human resources. We are today the fastest growing large economy in the world. And very soon, I'm sure, our dream of becoming a $5 trillion economy will be realized. And what are the implications of this? People say India has a demographic dividend. You will learn that in GS. Is it really a dividend, or is it a liability? Because most of the people in the country are in your age group. But this is the age where you will not be productive. In a sense, you're not yet in the tax-paying bracket. You know, while you not contributing anything to the economy in the form of taxes, the government is expected to take care of your health, your education, your training, your skill development. At the same time, law and order and security. We have been witnessing some horrible incidents happening in different parts of the country. Women, girls, young girls, law and order. So, is it really a demographic dividend, or are we looking at a liability and sugarcoating it as a dividend? These are the kind of questions we ask in this chapter. And anthropological demography also is there in paper 2. In paper 2, we will look at India's population, India's population policy, and we will be critically evaluating India's population policy with anthropological insights, and also offer suggestions to the government in the context of how we can probably plan our demographic future. How this, see, having big number is not sufficient. We should have good quality of the people also. People free from stress, people free from disease or squalor, and educated, skilled, and healthy and happy people. And are we able to create a society like that? Are we able to create an economy like that? Do we have institutions that will take care of the population and the problems? Are the kind of questions we ask, especially in the context of paper 2. And then we have something called ecological anthropology. What is ecology? Ecology is not environment. Exactly. Ecology is the study of the interaction between an organism and its environment. But here we study human ecology. The organism we are interested obviously in is the human organism. And human ecology is different from ecological anthropology in one way, that human ecology is by and large a part of biology and geography. But in our context, we also look at how we adapt behaviorally. We see when you're feeling, when you're in a social environment like this is an environment. You know, this is not necessarily a physical environment, but we call it a social environment. And we are supposed to adapt to a social environment as much as we are expected to adapt to the physical environment. Just like the way there is a temperature, altitude, humidity, and all the climatic features, even the behavioral environment also has different features. And you and I, as organisms, are at a subconscious level adapting not only to the physical environment, but we are also adapting behaviorally. And unlike other animals, you know, which adapt to a particular type of an ecosystem, you know, there's virtually not a single ecosystem in this world where there is no human population living. We live in the Arctic tundra. Take, for example, the Inuit. In English, they are called the Eskimo. We live in the coldest of the places on earth. We live in the hottest of the deserts. You know, we live in tropical rainforests. We live in coastal areas. And we also live in concrete jungles that we have created called the cities. Name one species that lives in such a diverse array of ecosystems. There's none. You know, you can say that dogs are living with humans everywhere, but we domesticated them. Don't forget that. You know, the rat probably is as successful as the human being, is because that bloody organism started piggybacking on our abilities. With agriculture came the rat menace, and we created enough opportunity for the rat to co-evolve with us. But there's no other organism that's adapting the way we do. And we don't wait for the hair to grow, you know, when it's turning cold, or we don't shed hair when it is turning hot. You know, we are accessing a toolkit called the cultural toolkit in order to survive in this kind of an environment. It's bloody hot and humid outside, but look at us. We are so comfortable, probably maintaining an ambient temperature of 23 degrees, is because we invented this technology that is enabling us to keep us alive. And do you know that we are the only species that has invented technology to prevent our own extinction? And the story of evolution, which Mr. Vinay will speak about during your classes, you will know that the more species are extinct today than they have actually evolved. And we beat all the odds, and today ended up becoming, living on the top of the food chain. And that means there is something in our adaptation that is keeping us alive. And that's what is our content in this particular chapter. And then you have a small chapter which is a part of my parental study. It's called epidemiological anthropology. What is epidemiology, people? I think because of that scourge called COVID, you must have been introduced to a lot of new words like epidemics, endemics, pandemics. You know, people who had very little interest in medicine and biology also started doing PhDs in the WhatsApp University during the COVID times. You know, even some presidents of some so-called developed countries were wondering if they can send UV rays through the blood to get rid of the COVID virus. The president of US then. But anyway, epidemiology is the study of the distribution of diseases. We have another feather in our cap as a human species. You know what that is? We have the longest list of diseases that can affect us, both infectious and non-infectious, both communicable and non-communicable. Even though we say I have been glorifying and romanticizing the human species, but biologically we are the most vulnerable species. There's virtually nothing that cannot kill us. A plant can kill us, a bloody pollen grain can kill us, viruses, fungi, algae, bacteria, protozoans. You know, you can't even afford to have a nice chart on the road is because the next day morning instead of the class you'll be in the toilet. Biologically we are very weak. But despite the fact that we are very vulnerable, you know, we are able to survive is because I just told you, we depend on technology, the medical science, the R&D, and thanks to all those doctors, we are able to survive today because of the genetic research, the medicine. And epidemiological anthropology is how our culture influences our health behavior. You know, what is a disease in your culture is probably a symptom of health in another culture. Are intestinal worms good or bad? Having worms in the intestines, good or bad? Good or bad? There's no depends. There's only one answer. Worms I'm talking about. Something like Tinea solium, you know, or schistosomiasis. Intestinal worms are bad. But there's a tribe called the Tonga in Central and South American Amazon. If somebody does not show the symptoms of a parasitic infection, then they will take that person to their doctor, their own doctor, their cultural doctor called ethnic doctor, and get that person treated. You know, having oozing pustules on the skin, you know, eczema, is considered to be a very nasty condition. We immediately run to a dermatologist, or maybe it requires a very serious antibiotic infusion. But there are some cultures which think that having some kind of eczema on the skin is a sign of good health. And somebody who doesn't have it probably is taken to a doctor for treatment. See, I mean, the way we perceive health, the way we interpret disease, the way we think what is dangerous and not dangerous is not defined by allopathy. You know, every system of medicine defines disease in its own way. You know, if something is troubling us, we first start with naturopathy, our grandmother remedies. You know, naturopathy doesn't treat, then we go to homeopathy. If that also doesn't treat, we go to probably allopathy. If allopathy also doesn't treat us, you know, where we go? We go to Tirupati. What is the first building you get to see when you enter a corporate hospital? Temple. That's not just in India. You go to any of the super specialty, go to Mount Sinai in New York, the Mecca of medical research. You know, there will be a prayer room inside. Why? Because health and religion are all dealing with a fundamental fact about our life, and that is death. So life and death, there are two people who deal with it. One is a doctor, a medical professional, and the second is religion, the god and the priest. That's why in India we say Vaidyo Narayano Hari. We treat the doctor as a god. Is because he deals with everything to do with between life and death. And religion also deals with life before birth and after death. And that continuum is something that is culturally defined. It's not defined by virology or medical science or whatever. It's defined by the human culture, the way we perceive life, death, disease, health, and illness. So, epidemiological anthropology, it's a small chapter which is a part of medical anthropology, a science that came into existence after Second World War. You know, when WHO was created, you know, the Western medicine was being introduced in many cultures, including India. And many people have refused to accept Western medicine. Many tribes in India also do not approach Western medicine unless it is very important. India has the world's best primary healthcare network. But unfortunately, you know, many of the primary health centers in tribal areas are not able to prevent early mortality rates, tribal diseases. Recently, Prime Minister launched the National Sickle Cell Anemia prevention program. One of the greatest programs is because tribal people have their own set of genetic disorders like sickle cell trait and others, which you will learn in genetics any which way. So, these are the areas that we discuss. And then you have a small part of archaeology. We call it, what is archaeology? How many of you know that archaeology is a branch of anthropology? It is one of the 4 branches of anthropology: sociocultural, physical, linguistic, and archaeological. In fact, the full name of archaeology is archaeological anthropology. And we study man, right? Who is man? Where did he come from? How do we answer the question, where did he come from? One, biological evolution, right? That's part of physical anthropology. Second, where did we come from culturally? That is archaeology. Same thing you have in GS, Paleolithic, Mesolithic. This is there in paper 1 and 2. We study world archaeology here. Dating. Have you heard about dating? Not the college dating, but archaeological dating. The moment I say dating, the first thing that comes to your mind is carbon 14. Recently, you know, in the Gyanvapi case, you know, archaeology was the final court of appeal. Ram Mandir, Babri Masjid case, also archaeology was the evidence was used by the Supreme Court. So this science is very important in a sense that, you know, not only in India, the world over, you know, there are many archaeologically important sites. And because of our industrialization, rapid increase in highways, airports, and seaports, many of these sites are disappearing. And if we lose one archaeological site, we are losing a chapter in our own history forever. Because most of these people, see, archaeology ends the day history begins. When did history begin? History begins with the invention of script. And probably the oldest script is only 5,000 years old. And how old is human culture, according to you? 1,37,000 years ago. Or actually, if you want me to put it strictly, it's more than 2.5 lakhs years ago. The first ancestor who made a tool was not even a human being. It was a glorified ape. Originally it was called Australopithecus. Today it's called Homo habilis. And the oldest culture in the world is a couple of lakhs years old. Archaeology begins then. And probably ends when, you know, the documented history begins. And for that, you know, you have history, which is a glorified, well-structured science with its own methods. But what about all that history that happened before the script? Anthropology. And Paleolithic, Mesolithic, I'm sure you heard in ancient India, I think, right? You have prehistory. You have the same thing in anthropology paper 2. We begin with Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic, Indus Valley civilization. And that's where we stop it, because uske baad to script hai. And I think in history you will look at Rigvedic, later Vedic, Bronze Age, Chalcolithic. So that is the another topic in paper one. This is socio-cultural anthropology. You have physical anthropology, which Mr. Vinoy will be discussing with you. But before I hand over to him, paper two, I would like to give you a bird's eye view about paper two. Paper two, I just told you, is Indian anthropology. So we study the demographic profile of India. This is where we study the Indian population, causes and consequences, a critical evaluation of India's population policy, the age structure, the sex structure of India. Some of the districts in India have sex structure which is very unfavorable to the women, you know, and the sex ratio, as we call it. When many countries in the world calculate male to female ratio, in India, we have been calculating female to male ratio for a very long time. The reason is mainly because in India, the culture, some cultures believe in son survivorship. The male child is considered to be an asset, whereas a girl child is considered to be a liability. That's why we have programs like Beti Padhao. Beti Bachao comes first, and then comes Beti Padhao. So sex structure, what are the implications? Age structure, what are the implications? Mortality rates, morbidity rates. India's infant mortality was very pathetic for a very long time. Today we have made a very wonderful progression in that. One program, you know, that has increased the lifespan of an average Indian is your hand washing in school, which was taken up as a part of Swachh Bharat. It's called Swachh Vidyalaya. And UNICEF has published a report that we have added at least 5 years to the life of every child thanks to a program like that. Because many deaths are preventable in India. And the government started looking at, you know, the concept of hygiene in our personal and social lives, personal hygiene and social hygiene. And that has tremendously improved our life chances. You know, what was our lifespan when we became independent? What was an average Indian's lifespan in 1947? Anyone? 27. Some reports put it at 32, but I think 32 was an exaggeration. But 27, 28 today, I think we breached the 70-year barrier. But you know how much it is for a developed country like the Scandinavian countries? 83, 85. Are not getting old like how we get old in India. We have dadis and nanis at home, but that's not getting old. They cannot see. They need people to help them walk. You know, in some cases, like my own mother, who is 87, we need to literally carry her to the car whenever she has a health problem. We are talking about leading a healthy 80 years. You go to Europe, grandmothers and grandfathers will be happily driving. You know, okay, they don't have drivers like India there, but happily driving. That's their terrains are not like us. You know, their terrains are all ghat roads everywhere. Happily they can read. Happily they can walk to the shops. They carry weights. That is the target India is planning for. Should aim for. These implications is what we study in the demographic profile, and we study the traditional Indian society. If I don't say that this is an anthropology class, people may think that I'm writing down your general studies syllabus here. You know, the traditional Indian society, what are the most important traditional Indian social systems? Varna, you know, Jati. Jati is what is internationally called caste. We talk about, I'm sure you heard about ashramas, brahmacharya, grihastha. You have Indian culture and heritage, no, in general studies. Yeah, and ancient Indian history, Vedic age or whatever. And then we look at the concept of karma, the karma philosophy. These are not to do anything to do with Hinduism, okay? These are the basic foundations of the Indian philosophy that continue to influence our ethos even today in the 21st century. The concept of salvation in Christianity is nirvana in Buddhism, or kaivalya in Jainism, is moksha in Hinduism. Every religion has the same fundamental principles. It's just that they speak the same thing, but they speak it in a different way. We say ekam sat vipra bahuda, ekam satyam, or the truth is only one, but vipra bahuda vadanti. The scholars speak the same thing in different languages and different ways. In your ethics, you have a chapter, philosophical foundations of ethical principles. Ethics and Human Nature, I think it is called, paper 4 of GS. And there you will be looking at these concepts once again. And then we will be looking at the most important is jati. We study everything from the origin of caste to how the caste system is prevailing in 21st century India, right from the past to the future. Today, caste has penetrated economics. Today, caste has penetrated politics. Caste has penetrated education. Caste is today the most important phenomenon, despite the fact that it's the 21st century. Why? Why is it that caste is playing such an important role? What does the Constitution of India say? How is it that the caste system is penetrating institutions that it was even unaware of in the past? So this evolutionary perspective of caste is a part of your Indian society, I think, that paper. And then we look at India's villages. This is called rural anthropology or village studies, Panchayat Raj. What is the social impact of Panchayat Raj? What are the characteristics of Indian villages? Indian villages, again, are very unique. And despite the fact that agriculture's contribution to GDP has come down, still a majority of people are living in villages. India is called Gramavasini Bharati. The real India lives in villages. And this village is something that is an integral part of our lives, even today. And this villages, how are the villages withstanding urbanization? What is the impact of globalization on villages? How is the farming sector and agrarian economy, getting impacted by the forces of modernization? And all these aspects is what we study in rural anthropology. And then we look at the most important vulnerable sections in India. Who are the vulnerable sections in India according to the Constitution? Scheduled castes, scheduled tribes. We have the other backward classes. Can someone tell me what is the C in OBC? Class, right? But why are we interpreting it as caste? Why is it that there is a demand for caste census? Do you know the implications? Because many people are confused about what does that C stand for. What is the Constitution? What does the Constitution say? Who the OBCs are? SCs are clearly defined. STs are clearly defined. But one bone of contention, which has been a part of the politics in the recent general election also is the OBC, right? Constitution doesn't define them. Any group of people who are not SCs and STs are OBCs. Any other backward classes, according to Constitution of India, there are only 2 backward classes. 3 actually. One is SC, the second is ST. The third one is very vaguely touched upon. They are called socially and educationally backward classes. And they came to be defined as OBCs in India. But there's a lot of confusion in this domain. And that confusion is mainly because of the evolution of the concept of OBC in India. First one is called Kalekar Committee Report, Kaka Saheb Kalekar. Then came the famous Mandal Commission. And how the OBCs have evolved, what are their problems, what are the constitutional protections, what is the government doing, For all these vulnerable sections, we will be doing a study which is intense, and we look at them threadbare. And then we also have a special category of scheduled tribes. All the tribes are not at the same level of development. Some of them are more backward than the others, and they are called the PVTGs, the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. The Prime Minister PVTG mission was launched recently. And then who are the other people whom the Constitution desires to be protected? Apart from them, minorities. You know, each one is a different chapter in your paper too. And when you look at the syllabus, you will know the past, the present, the future, the constitution, the economy, the polity, culture. And tribals we study a lot is because nobody else studies them, honestly speaking. Sociology is focusing on modern societies, economics, political science, but nobody is looking at the traditional societies, the indigenous people. They are called Adivasi. They are the ones who are the aborigines of India. And we look at all their problems also. How many types of minorities are there in India as per the constitution? 2. Who are they? No. Religious minorities and linguistic minorities. Right? And religious minorities, anyone who is not a Hindu is a religious minority. And linguistic minorities, there's a schedule that identifies many languages. If anybody is speaking in a language that is not the official language of the state in which they are living, are technically linguistic minorities wherever they are living. There are millions of Bengalis who live outside West Bengal, Punjabis who live outside Punjab, Hindi-speaking people who live outside the Hindi-speaking belt. There are many Kashmiris outside the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And the way when they live in different states, you know, they have their own set of problems. Like some state governments today made proficiency in the regional language as a mandate for public service commission exams. You know, you need to know Telugu if you have to write APPSC. You need to know Kannada when you have to write Karnataka Public Service Commission. So how are these policies affecting the people? How are the linguistic minorities' interests are being threatened? Religious minorities have their own set of problems, and linguistic minorities have their own set of problems. We start everything from the origin all the way to the contemporary societies. And then there is another vulnerable group in India. Have you heard about them? DNT? No? It's part of your general studies syllabus. And who are DNTs? They are called the denotified tribes, but actually they are denotified communities. And the British government for a very long time identified some tribes as criminal tribes. And these people who are denotified are called the criminal tribes. So that's another chapter. And then you have regionalism, communalism, and ethnic movements in India. This is again a part of your general studies. India is having many problems which are actually disturbing the national integration. And communalism is not just a Hindu-Muslim problem. There's caste communalism in India. There is a gender communalism in India. Communalism comes in various forms. There is a rural-urban divide, which is also responsible for a lot of issues, you know, which are tearing the unity and integrity of India. So this chapter, I think this is also an integral part of your general studies, where we study the causes, what the Constitution says, and we also study secularism. The way India understands secularism is very different from the way secularism is practiced in the Western countries. And these are the topics that are lined up in your paper too. So that, anyway, physical anthropology, Mr. Vinoy will be taking you through. You have any specific questions? Number one, why anthropology? All these areas that are common to your general studies, you don't have to study them again separately for general studies. Anthropology gives you a critical understanding of these areas, which is extremely important for you to score in your general studies. Most of you do not have social science background. There's some level of critical evaluation and critical thinking that is required for general studies and general essay and even personality test. And anthropology is an interdisciplinary study of everything. There's nothing virtually out of syllabus. And that holistic interdisciplinary understanding is the bare minimum for any student who is competing in the civil service examination. I don't think any optional will give you the kind of insight that anthropology gives you. And the results are there for all of you to see. In the year 2022, close to 300 marks is what anthropology directly and indirectly influenced in general studies and general essay. You take last year's general studies paper, these are not just what do you call hawa mein baatein. You know, there was a question in GS 2023. Do you think marriage as a sacrament is losing its value in modern India? 10 marks. This is general studies, okay, not even general essay. Explain why suicide among young women is increasing in Indian society. You know, why did human development fail to keep pace with economic development? Why is caste identity in India static as well as fluid? And when you go through the syllabus of anthropology, you will see that this is not an overlap, this is an interface where, you know, you cannot complete general studies without an anthropological insight. And all the students of anthropology don't have to study them specially. And there are some areas in GS that are interdisciplinary. That means they are neither completely economics, neither completely politics, neither completely Indian society. Those are called the multidisciplinary areas. And none of the subjects actually deals with them, but we do, because that's an integral part of our syllabus. Anthropology is also favored because of its course. And I don't know whether you are aware that one of the highest scores that anthropology students got 2023 was 325. And we are looking at that score out of 500. I mean, before 2015, when anthropology was a 600 mark paper, people scored 455 and 460. The reason is pretty simple. You don't have to have a sophistication in English to write answers. You can write these answers in point forms, bullet points. Some of the topics in especially physical anthropology have the potential to give you 100% marks. Is because all you require is a simple documentation of the points and then a simple illustration. And most importantly, you are not escaping anthropology by not taking it. Is because they are integral to your understanding of GS and general essay. Discuss the impact of post-liberal economy on ethnic identity and communalism. Post-liberal economy and communalism, for God's sake, are they comparing oranges and apples here and expecting you to come out with an answer? But no. Post-liberal economy, communalism are very much influencing each other. But those connections is something that are not easily explored in other sciences. But in anthropology, it is not just it's a compulsion. We need to look at things in a holistic way. How did the colonial rule affect the tribals in India, and what was the tribal response to colonial oppression? In fact, today the tribes in India have such a big list of problems is mainly because the colonial rulers opened up the tribal areas for non-tribals to go and settle down there. Displacement. You know, India is home to a special brand of refugees, and they are called development refugees. You know, people get displaced from the villages not because of an ethnic conflict. They don't get displaced because of a natural calamity, but people in India also get displaced because of development projects. How can we protect the rights of tribal people? Even rural people are indigenous, farmers. And rural anthropology and tribal anthropology is where we will be looking at how development is impacting the various people. So these are some of the reasons why anthropology is popular. Now, about 12 to 18% of the students, that's the success rate in anthropology so far. The numbers are pretty decent looking at the overall success rate in this examination. And you can go through the in Vajiram website, there are some webinars we have conducted, and there will be, you will have a lot more information on that. And you still have any questions after today's session, you are welcome to get in touch with me. This is my email ID, kartic.anthro@gmail.com. I will be available in building 9. 7:30 to 10 is my class every morning. So I am there in case you want to see me personally, discuss your options with me, or Mr. Vinoy, you can mail us a day or two before and you can come and see us anytime. Okay, that's from my end. You have any questions? Anyone? Mr. Vinoy will take over. He will give you a bird's eye view about physical anthropology, the area that he will be dealing with you. I'm sure some of you must have met him. He also teaches science and technology. And there's a lot of what you will learn from his session is a lot of overlap between your science and tech and anthropology, also a physical anthropology. So thank you so much for lending your time and ears. And should you have questions, you are most welcome to get in touch with me anytime. I wish you all the best. God bless you. Thank you.
All right. Good evening again. I hope many of you already know me through the science and technology classes. Let me start at the very outset with the statement that the physical anthropology part for any sincere aspirant is possibly going to be the strongest of the pillar that will make you an IAS. Okay, we'll just wait for a minute until he appears. Audible, Abhi? Audible? थोड़ा सा वॉल्यूम बढ़ा लीजिए. Okay, so it is, as I said, going to be possibly the strongest of the pillar you can bank upon to give you some handsome marks to become an IAS. For the simple reason that this is going to be the most objective part of your entire syllabus required. And the other advantage is that the questions in the physical anthropology are going to be highly repetitive. So it will not leave much of the scope for thinking out of the box in the examination hall. If you have been sincere and exhaustive in your coverage, you can rest assured that this is going to be the biggest support for you. Let me give you a very quick, the bird eye view of what are we going to be covering in very short bullet points. So I'll not take much of your time now. But so the study of physical anthropology starts with a very fundamental chapter that any student normally, even before the 10th standard, comes to study in the science. A cell. Possibly the easiest of the question that you can ask to someone, what is a cell? Although many a times it becomes very tricky to define it. Those who have had the GS class would have had this experience, that the moment someone asks what is a cell, you have the tendency of saying the structural and functional unit of life, or the basic unit of life, or the fundamental unit of life. But then you get to see that the cell has diverse amplifications, like the prison cell or the cellular phone, or cell as the chamber in which the Buddhist monks used to do their meditation. But keeping all that aside, we'll certainly be starting with the basic understanding of the living cell, which would not require anything beyond what you will anyway study in your school days in the NCERTs or any state or ICSE board or the CBSE board books. Once we will understand that the cell is the basic unit of life, the next straightforward question that we will arrive at as to where is all the information of the life stored? How is the life constructed in the manner it is? Why we see the different forms of life all around and the biodiversity, as we call it? And if at all, is there any particular plan or program or written information which exists, which is getting acted upon and is getting passed on from one generation to the another? I hope many of you are already figuring out we are talking about the genetic material. So as a part of the syllabus, you are supposed to develop a very fundamental understanding of where is the entire text of every detail of every organism stored, which in a generic term we call it as the genetic material. To be more precise, all of you must have heard of the term called DNA. And then within that there are some basic sub-concepts that we will also be talking about. The things like, or the simple terms like the genes, the genome, the chromosomes, which I'm sure if you have already started with your GS preparation, anyway you would have come across these terms as a part of the biotechnology or the sciences preparation. Now, having understood all of it, some of the basic terms as to where is the information of the life coded, we will straight away go into how this information is passed from one generation to another. Why there are many of the features which a person has gets passed on to the other generation in a very predictable manner. So is there some law or rule through which we can decode that? And in doing that, again a very fundamental topic that I believe many of you might have already come across in your school days, where we will try to understand the laws of inheritance. And that most important or popular name that every time you talk about it that comes to your mind, yes, what? Gregor Mendel, the person who for the very first time put everything in the inheritance study or the genetic study as it is called in the most systematic of the manner. Once we will try to decode in what basis the laws are to be formulated, we will straight away without any waste of time try to check whether whatever laws that Mendel, what Mendel studied the genetics or inheritance principles on? The pea plant. But then the question, are these laws that he studied through the pea equally applicable on the humans? And that is where we will see there are so many characters that the humans have. For example, if I tell you your ability to roll your tongue into a tube, or some people not being able to do that. Or for that matter, some of you might have your hair pattern in the forehead which will be creating a V mark here, while some of you might have it the recession line here. All these are very easy to observe traits, people, which are passed on from one generation to another just in the same manner as it is commonly seen in absolutely distant organism like the pea. But then the moment we will study human and the genetics, we will realize there is a reason why humans are some of the, one of the most sophisticated of all the species. We cannot be totally simplified in the bracket of a pea plant, and we will see how there are many characters and traits. By the way, every time I'm talking about the character or trait, we are referring to the multiple variants of it, some of which could be the physical forms, your nose shape, structure, your height, your skin color, your hair structure, texture, physiological forms, your ability to digest a food or not to digest a food, how you respire, how you circulate the blood in your entire body, or to a certain extent, even the behavior. When you have this freedom to say that a Labrador is much more docile than a Rottweiler, where are you getting this information from? The fact that this behavior of the dog in the two breeds that we know of is passed on from one generation to another following the predictable laws. But we cannot say all the Labradors will be equally docile and all the Rottweilers would be equally aggressive. Which is to say that behavior is an abstract thing where the impact of many other factors will also come in. And that is what we will try to study, that are all the characters of the man very easy to predict through the simple laws of Mendel, or are there other elements of impact also? So we will study the different characters, and through those characters, what are the factors that control the inheritance pattern, and see if it could be predicted. Take it. One of the way to understand the order or the importance of order is to study disorder and what causes it. And that is why you will find more often than not in the study of genetics or why or how we inherit characters, the best of the tools that we have are the genetic diseases. So using the different genetic diseases, diseases which are inherited from one generation to another, we will try to formulate our understanding of how the characters get inherited in the man. And just when you will all be trying to develop that sense of comfort that the things are so well mathematical, we can make predictions, suddenly will come the question to you, are the criminals born or made? The typical theme around which the Bollywood movies in the few years back were all centered around. Koi criminal paida nahi hota sahab, and then society makes it and all that. And this is where the entire debate, which is a very controversial area of genetics, let me tell you, called behavioral genetics. And is it everything predictable, or there are many gray shades or gray areas around it? So we will then focus into the debate between nature versus nurture, wherein we will look into what we have received through the genetic property from our parents and what we are getting through the environment. Then environment itself is a very complex and an open-ended term. It could include your culture, your food, your friends, your parents, the festivals you celebrate, the country you are born in. So it is way more complex than we can normally think of. So how all of these could be influencing the happening or non-happening of the different character aspects. And in that, it will make for a very interesting study when we will talk about the twins. Let me tell you, for the geneticists, twins are the real treasure, because the twins are born largely similar. If at all, there are different types of twins that we'll be studying, but one particular category, let us say the monozygotic, or remove the technical term, identical twins, they are born exact carbon copies. Does that mean they are going to have everything same in their behavior pattern, in the diseases they have, in the traits they express? And in studying that, we can even find out how much fractionally is the role of the environment. If someone had a very good relationship, becomes quite a supporter, advocate of, okay, one must fall for someone. Someone had unfortunately a nasty bond, might have a different opinion. You see, the experiences also shape you. Someone qualified the UPSC through the particular optional. Someone fared pathetically. That may lead to two different conclusions. So we will look into how both of them lead to the complex expression of the different characters, and that is going to give you a lot of awakening in why and how of the different characters that we have. Talking about the anomalies, when I talked about genetic diseases, we'll also see the different levels of it. You know, in the genetic material that we have in our cells, a normal human, I must tell you, is made up of not less than 30 to 50 trillion cells, 10 to the power 12. And with that, each of the cell in our body has got the entire genetic material, huge texts people already written in it. If you ever hear someone now saying that sab pehle se likha hua hai ji, everything is pre-written. If you look from this perspective, yes it is. And just when sir was very rightly talking about the humans' attempt at writing history and dating back to, a few thousands of years, if you forget, take away the human element into it, the history book, the most voluminous, the most extensive and the most ancient ever, is our genetic material that we have in ourselves. They have every information right from the point the life got created. And not only the history book, our genetic material is also the best book in astrology that you could have. By reading that text, you can even work out where are we headed, what are we going to be shaped like in future. So that is the beauty of studying the genetics and the reason why we study that. So I told you that the diseases could occur at different levels. Maybe you do the minor tweaking of the words in your textbook or in your note. That may cause horrendous changes in the meaning. Like in the JS classes, I tell you, if you remember the movie Three Idiots and that iconic speech and the entire, yes, that word, and the entire change of that speech's meaning was because of a tiny change of a letter in the word, right? Same happens in our genetic material also. For the slightest of the changes of the letters in the language of life, we can have some very difficult genetic diseases. But not always the changes are small. Many a times the entire set could have got replaced. So we will study the genetic diseases at smaller levels and higher levels. For example, the chromosomal level diseases also. I believe many of you might have heard about the terms like Down syndrome, Turner syndrome, right? Klinefelter syndrome. Even if you have not, these are the basic terms that we will be developing comfort with. And possibly the most contextual of them all, something that all of you must have been coming across in the present Olympics, the concept of gender and the science behind it. The chromosomal configuration and gender, you might have all been reading through the different awareness programs also. XX is female and XY in the 23rd pair chromosome is the male. But how about this Algerian boxer who created all the controversy, went on to win the gold in her category, was born with XY, the chromosome pair. What kind of an anomaly is that? And that is going to be one of the interesting topic that we'll also study, the entire development of gender as a concept and what is the science and biology behind that. Having figured out the different aspects of the prediction of the characters in the humans, we will now move on to a higher level. Rather, from individuals, we will then move down to the populations. Because you would agree, people, even when we look within a particular group, look in this class itself, you will say no two people are alike. But when we have to be looked on by someone who belongs to an absolute distant race altogether, maybe 6,000 kilometers away from here, they will look at us not possibly by the individual differences that we may have, but by some common features we could be summarized into. You would also do the same if you are looking at a different distant population altogether, which means there are some common genetic property all of us might be having, because of which we have some common traits, and the similar some common genetic properties the other group might be having. And in studying that, we will study the entire human population into individual groups and then bring in the impact of globalization. How has this group identity been created in the first place? Because a certain group within a geographical boundary, they for ages through their cultural practices and the norms that are established have been marrying within that particular group. So whatever character that they have been inheriting, they have been passing it on to that one common group only. But bring in the impact of globalization, bring in the impact of migration. All these things when brought into, you will see that this is changing. The populations, their characters are now evolving and not remaining the same as it has been observed earlier. Which means first we will study the genetics inheritance at the level of population. There is a specific term that is called population genetics, and once we will see how the populations are changing, we will then through this introduce one of the most universal of all the processes in the class. Again, something that most of you would have had the basic exposure to the term evolution in your school days itself. It is that change, people, wherein the populations go through is what is called as evolution. The syllabus requires you to just have the understanding of some of the laws or theories of evolution propounded by the different people. However universal this concept may be, universal in the sense there is nothing which does not evolve. Tangible, non-tangible, living, non-living, the landforms change, your thought process evolves, you within your own lifespan evolve, you as a species are evolving. Despite this being the universal most of all laws, people, there is no one last theory on it. You will see it all began with the Aristotle, Plato, they all tried their own ways of explaining it, influenced by the knowledge they had by then, the philosophy, the theology, all into it. But ultimately, with the modern science, as the genetics also came into, we will see how the things started getting more refined with the emergence of people like Darwin. I believe this is another name that possibly people from every background have come across. Charles Darwin. Because he, again, like Mendel, was the first person who propounded the entire understanding in possibly the most systematic of all ways. But you know what is the common mistake that the people make? They consider Darwin and evolution synonymous. What is Darwin, if at all you have to put in that term known best for the theory? Survival of the fittest, as it is called. But we will see that Darwin's theory had lot of loopholes. Obviously, because he was so ahead of his time. Any scientist, take it, any person who gives any theory, any observation, any rule or law, which is way ahead of his or her time, it becomes extremely difficult for that person to prove his observation correct to the world. And the world is absolutely brutal. They will not just take anything lying down. If Newton goes on to say, because I saw the apple falling, there is something called as gravity, people will say, no, explain what causes it. And that is when, since he did not have much of the tool to explain it, he said that there is some attraction between the two. But mind it, there is no such attraction as such. But the genius Newton, he gave a formula that even with a wrong explanation possibly, that formula fits in perfectly well. You still abide by that. But Einstein later on came, and with the tools and observations that we had extra, he proved the other way, the gravity explanation. Same we will understand that how Darwin's way of explaining evolution will be further refined and will be called as the modern synthetic theory of evolution. That is what ultimately the evolution as a topic you will be supposed to study. Very simple terms and simple laws in an objective way that we have to prepare for. Now, one of the offshoot of the population genetics, people, is again a very common term that you use in the daily life. The term race. Just as in the other organisms you use the term breed. In the humans, we call it race. The different groups which could be identified by some common feature, something that I was talking about. We will have to study the definition of it, what is race, and what are the parameters. What are the parameters on the basis of which the different races, you might have heard about the Negroid race, the Caucasoid race, the Mongoloid race. These are some of the basic terms that, if at all you have come across, is what that we have to study in this. What are the different races basic in the entire world and in India? On what particular parameters are they, classified? And one last little thing, are these parameters justified enough? What is the utility of these parameters? Because I tell you some of the common, features on the basis of which the races get grouped. You can easily tell the skin color, the hair texture, the nose shape structure. But we will study that this is so abstract because there is so much of variations in it. It is difficult to define the races on these parameters. And by doing that, you will also be able to work out very cogent arguments against one of the contorted offshoot of it, racism. The idea that some of the groups are born superior or are designed to be inferior. And we will see how it is this thought which had become the reason for many of the genocides in the past. Discriminations that we have had, not allowing certain groups to, reproduce, not allowing certain groups to even live and produce bodies, organisms. And this is what that through the study of race and whether the parameters are justified enough, you will be able to debunk the theory of racism. In a way, it will give you very good arguments against it. But then, fine, race as a concept might be getting outdated. But then, the study of anthropology will then lead you to understanding that grouping in the world is not unnecessary, but it requires new tools for it. We will see how, based on the blood group, we can classify the world. Based on the pulse rate, we can see the variations in the world. Based on the fat content, we can classify the world, because through these bases, we will work out the various applications or usages that are derived through this. So race study is going to be one of the important aspects of it. Once we cover all these fundamentals, you will also then go to the applied area, what you will call growth and development. One of the major domain of the physical anthropology. A simple story of how the life begins with the first cell called zygote. It continues into turning into a baby, and the different stages into the infanthood, the childhood, the youth, the adulthood, the aging, and then the death. This will be a chapter of the story of womb to the tomb. And if at all, this entire journey that as a human we take up, has it got certain well-defined phases or stages? So we will see how this entire development of the zygote to the baby could be studied in two distinct phases, like pre-embryonic, embryonic, fetal stages. And once we study these differences, we will see what are the different factors that may control the different stages and its optimization with respect to the growth and development. Post the birth, we will see how is the growth and development studied with respect to the tempo and the pattern. Do we grow at the same pace all through the life, or are there variations in the pace that we have? Are there bursts of growth that we have? Do we have the similar gene expression, similar character all the life, or the abilities also, let us say reproductive ability is one of the most important, they change. And then what are the factors that influence it? Once we understand some of the basic features on it, we will then try to see, is everyone having the stages and the phases of growth and development exact carbon copy, or are there milestones that each one of us might have slight variations in reaching to? Is every baby going to start walking at the same age, or would there be variations? The ability to speak, will that be at the same age, or will there be variations? And then a very interesting discussion would also be on what we call aging. How much of that is something that you cannot do anything about? We all age without a question, but is it in the same manner? Is aging absolutely non-modifiable, or is it also modifiable along with being non-modifiable in some of the factors? Why is it that in some of the pockets of the world there are places wherein almost every member lives to be 100 plus, and there have been researches wherein they have found out there are some of the common features that all of these places have the people following. So in a way, other than preparing you for the exam, it will also give you some of the thumb rules to stay youthful for a longer period and compress the period of reduced abilities to the possible least possible end point of your life when the death approaches. Then people, in the same growth and development, we also study the different body types. You might have seen where there are some people who will, gormandize, they'll eat like anything, but they don't put on weight. Well, there are few who are quite miser in their eating behavior, but they very easily put on weight. So is it some of us are, or are people designed to have a particular body type, come what may? And this is where comes a very interesting field of study called somatotyping. Soma is the term used for body. And based on this, there we'll see how some of the scientists did some real good work and tried to formulate some of the basic principles on the basis of which we can classify the population into body types, which in itself can then serve very various applicational interests. How about which sport are you going to excel at? And based on your body typing, your choice making of the sport that you take up could also decide how successful you could be. So your excellence in the sports could be based on your training, your determination, but also somewhat based on your genetic endowments. Is it not that Michael Phelps got so many Olympic golds not only because of his better training, better coaches, more discipline, but is it not also because of the genetic endowment that fellow was blessed with? His wingspan was much bigger than any normal person would have. I was just reading particularly in relation to this gender related case of the recent Olympics, that the record for the long jump was held by the lady who was blessed to have more powerful Achilles tendon. That's the tendon that connects your heel to the remaining part of the body. Generally the police are, when they have to go for non-fatal shooting, they hit at that, because once that gets ruptured, the person cannot hold on to the weight of the body. So is it that we have genetic endowments also that will also dictate terms as to how would you perform? That will be a very interesting topic to study. We'll club all of it, and towards the last part we will study how every basic understanding that we have developed in the physical anthropology could give you a lot of advantage in better planning, as I just have hinted, in the sports, the tool designing, the training, the nutrition. You will study how having in some of the sport fat is a liability. Why fat is a liability, anyone? For some of the sporting excellence? Because fat adds to the passive mass. It is not contributing to the performance. So that's an added weight that you have to negotiate through that sporting exercise. But then in some of these sports, it could add to some value, a moderate amount of it. Swimming. because it will add to the buoyancy. So we will see how the study of physical anthropology could help in almost all the aspects of sporting excellence. I'll tell you, there is trend today that in most of the developed societies, these parents who want their kids to get into the sports, right at the time of the birth, they go for the genetic screening and find out what genetic makeup do they have. Based on that, what could be the ideal selection of the sports for maximizing the rewards. And then they accordingly go for the tool designing, the shoe shaping, the dress, the nutrition, everything. We'll also see how nutrition is going to be largely influenced by the physical anthropological principles. The culture determines your food choices. The religion decides the geography decides the food choices, and how the food choices then may ultimately have the impact on the health and the diseases that a person has. Very easy to connect, just as we have it for the sports. Can the physical anthropology be extremely helpful for optimizing your defense preparedness with respect to your personnel trainings, their gun, their dress designing, their tent is designing, their helmets. So, CSIR in India is developing what you call as exoskeleton. What is exoskeleton? People, what we have is naturally is called endoskeleton. The skeleton is there inside. Have you seen the cockroaches they have, or the lady beetle? They have the upper wing, which is very hardy. That is called exoskeleton. So CSIR is recently, been developing the exoskeleton that could be put on by the shoulders, and that is acting as a good support so that they could have a very easy climbing up through the hills. How is anthropology influencing the designing of it? How can you design the suits which, when as a pilot flying at great heights where the pressure of the atmosphere is extremely low, you will not have your blood pressure then pushing your blood out. So there are suits designed which will create the counter pressure against it and keep you normal. So we'll study all of that, and then we'll be focusing on the forensics applications. Forensics, people, means investigative. Many times you consider forensics to be synonymous with crime investigation. Not exactly that. Crime investigation is one of the most glamorized part of it, wherein we keep getting to read in the newspapers, like let us say in the present case that has happened in Kolkata, wherein forensics will play an important role in deciding how many perpetrators of the crime could have been there at the scene of the crime by trying to find out the biological specimen. But forensics would help you to generate the identification of the biological stuff for something very old as well, the fossil evidences. You can even do study of the genocides that have happened in the past through the evidences that you dig out, which has been lying under the soil for ages. How we will see that the different aspects of the human body, the skeletal remains, the DNA, the fingerprint, the iris, every aspect of the human body has got some sense of identity markers, and how to utilize those identity markers to make some investigative inferences, again to multiple applications that we'll look at. This is largely what we are going to be covering. There is one question that has been asked, like not having biology. Mr. Krishna, as you noticed, other than that initial part where we'll be studying cell, which anyway is the most fundamental you'll be studying for your GS, rest everything is the application of it. So for the initial part, focusing in the very basic building, and as I told you, something as simple as studying your NCERTs could suffice to support in that, would keep it easy. But still, to that question, if someone has had BA in geography or ancient history, how could physical anthropology be of great help to you? As I started with some of the very basic points as to how physical anthropology can become the strongest point in your preparation are the fact that, as I told you, they are extremely objective, these topics. So much so that most of the times I have noticed the questions that are formulated in the exam are directly lift of the words that are there in the syllabus, short note on this. It makes your job so very easy, your mind stay at peace, that there is not going to be much of twisting around with the words and the concepts. And given that it is objective and the number of topics are limited, there will be a great chance of repetition. And all these years of me mentoring people, I've noticed the students are so smart. They're able to do all the homework and they're even able to, figure out what is the probability of each of the particular topic of appearing, and accordingly they can ensure their preparation seriousness. Although not a strategy that I will suggest, I'll say cover everything, but in a way there are topics that have a great deal of prediction that okay, they can appear again, have not been touched upon. And third, one of the biggest advantage, because you know what, studying any optional is not primarily with the view of academic pursuit, that you want to get learned in that area. It is a part of a strategy making, whether that subject is going to facilitate you getting to that goal or not. Plain and simple. So while the subject itself is capable of giving you predictable marks without much of slippery grounds, it should also have sufficient bit of overlap with the GS. I mean, cliched, all of you already know this. And in that sense, physical anthropology is going to always keep you quite satisfied. Given, I'll just show you some of the questions, how straightforward. So you will find a huge overlap with the GS syllabus. So in a way, physical anthropology is going to be the biggest of the strengths that you may have. Let me show you some of the questions and how they are straight away going to be benefiting those who might have done any sincere preparation for the physical anthropology. So let's have a look. These are some of the prelims questions. I'll also go to the mains. Look at, there was a question on metagenomics. Genomics is a topic that we have to study as a part of the physical anthropology also. We talk about the genomics and the different dimensions of it, how studying the genomes has got a list of application. If you know the genomics, aerial is quite a hint in itself. It is not going to take much to figure out the right answer. Microsatellite DNA. Microsatellite, mini satellite is a part of the genome that you study in the genetic polymorphism as the topic of the physical anthropology. This is absolute basic. Plant cells and animal cells difference. Anyway, when you study the cells, you'll get to have. You don't need to be a physical anthropology student to answer this, but still the study of the topic cell. Yeah, as I told you, the entire principles of genetics is going to be using, yes, what, to study the pattern? The diseases, the hereditary diseases. There are straight away questions from there. And quite possible, these diseases are always in the news. Let us say the sickle cell anemia that sir was also referring to. Sickle cell anemia is like a master key in many of the genetic principles that we'll be studying, will fit in as a very good example. DNA barcoding. It is again connected with the microsatellite DNA that we'll be studying, genetic polymorphism. You will find repeated every year, there are questions, recombinant vector vaccines. We will study the recombinant DNA technology. Once you study the DNA and its ability to predict the genetics for you, the quest of humans to change the DNA. So when you say that I made the statement sab pehle se likha hua hai ji, the genetics means everything has been pre-written. But in today's world, with the tools that we have, you get the power, hum likha badal denge ji, the power to change what is pre-written. And that is what is called as recombinant DNA technology, and the multiple applications that you study in the class anyway. The vaccine part of it. I mean, a lot. I can go on showing this. Let me give you a couple of mains questions that have been asked. discuss several ways in which the microorganisms can help meeting the current fuel shortage. This is a question of biofuel and how again genetic engineering can allow these microorganisms to generate richer productivity in the biofuel production. That's a simple question. Life expectancy, health challenges in the community. This is a straight offshoot of the topic I was talking about, aging and the different dynamics associated. What are the research and development achievements in the applied biotechnology, RDT, recombinant DNA technology, and the applications? You cover sufficiently. The question related to the COVID. How can biotechnology help to improve the living standards of farmers? So you see, both with respect to the mains as well as with respect to the prelims, you keep getting ample of the questions that you will be a straight beneficiary from the anthropology route. What I do is give enough of the material in the classes right from the very beginning. As I told you, take it as a philosophy, not only true for anthropology but possibly across the board. You are not learning a subject for the academic excellence, you are learning it as a tool to cross an exam. So right from the very beginning, whatever topic, content that you are exposed to, keep looking at the possible questions that could be asked from that area. I ensure that every participating person write the answers related to those topics, which to begin with is far from perfect, but gradually you start getting the hang of it, and then comes a point wherein it becomes the back of your palm. Other than the class notes, I share the images, the text through the PDF, and I ensure that you don't require the reading of any additional textbooks to get comfortable for the clearing of the exam. If still have any further question, shoot. Mr. Krishna, I hope you got it answered. Oh, good, Omkesh. Okay, then all the best, all of you. Make right choices, start working hard. I could be reached at this mail ID. ठीक है, ऊपर वालों, we'll meet again.